Hello, thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hello everyone, welcome to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. I'm your host Paul, and this is Sunday, May 25th, 2025, and this is episode 34. And I want to thank all the listeners, all the support, all the emails we've been getting, and our email address is recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. You can also find us on several of the major platforms, the streaming platforms. There's Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, several others, Podomatic. And tonight we are continuing a series that we've been starting. This is part 4 of Traditions in All Our Affairs with Judy L from Westminster, Colorado. How you doing, Judy?
I'm good, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I tell you, I've really, really enjoyed this. It's given me a lot of new context. Like just, I love how you've been describing, or just sharing your experience with stuff that. And adding enough context and some of the history to where it was like, oh, okay, it's starting to make sense in a different way, right?
Well, I'm really glad for how you preface this, saying that it's one person's opinion and not certainly speaking for AA. And I really appreciate that because somebody else will see it perhaps very differently.
Yeah.
And that's fine too. This is just one yokel talking pretty.
Yeah.
Just sharing kind of what we've got is our experience. You're right. That's what we've got. And a little bit of history and some love and passion for Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah. It was, I'd shared it with you in the past, but it was one of those things where like, my service sponsor several years back when we started going through the traditions, it initially started as like we don't do that type thing. And then all of a sudden, like, when I think of it like that, it's like, oh man, these people are just, old crotchety, that generation's going to die out. And then he was like, well, no, we don't do it because of this. And we started going through a lot of the history. And after we went through that, I was like, holy crap. Yeah, we have a responsibility with this, right?
Right. And that's part of, it's a great responsibility.
Yeah.
In that, we come here and everybody kind of does for us. And then we realize, oh, they can't be doing for us. It's ours to do with.
Yeah.
It's ours to take care of.
Nice. Yeah.
As an AA entity. And then you realize, oh, golly, it's also ours when it's my family that I'm watching and my job. And do I have responsibility or do I have any way of treating them that kind of falls within some basic principles that might apply to my life?
Oh.
And we don't get those until we get them like in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they make sense, partly because we have something we care about instead of just haphazardly just showing up to take. We have something we care about, and we begin to understand that it's in all of our best interest to take care of that thing.
Nice. I like how you put that, yeah. You hear a lot of times people say, well, they changed this and they changed that. And it's like, no, we did that. We're Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Yep, and we're entitled to make mistakes.
Yeah.
We've made some big ones. I get really angry at it, and it's my right in the concepts to have a different opinion.
Yeah.
It is my right to contact GSO and tell them when I think there's a difference of, are you breaking the traditions? And the reason I feel so seriously about this is because I believe way down deep that my life depends on AA unity, and that makes me make certain kinds of decisions that affect how I see Alcoholics Anonymous going in the future.
Hmm.
And when I see us focusing on money in instead of service and spiritual principles being the thing that we're promoting, when it's all about money, for example, or when we get somebody who, and it's usually individuals who have ambition or greed or, do any of the human tendencies that we fall into. It's our job as members to not support, to maybe even do nothing in terms of, I don't go to hear about them, I don't go support them, I don't send them money, I don't. Why? Because I really care about Alcoholics Anonymous in the future. And I'm just one person. I don't have a majority voice. I'm just one person. So I get to figure out, what do I do with that? Right? So it's out of love for Alcoholics Anonymous that many of us show up and have different opinions, right? I think other people love AA too, but this is mine. And feel like I'm on a big rowing team and everybody has to take an oar now and then and take your turn.
Love that.
Yeah.
And
then when it's your turn, you pass the oar to somebody else and teach them how to row.
Nice. Yeah. I tell you, like, whenever I was able to, put it into firsthand experience when I really started taking, taking meetings into, like, I'm the treatment chair for my district right currently. But when I started taking meetings into the facilities, it's so easy for my opinion to get in the way, and
right.
Having gone through the traditions and was able to, put some of that stuff to practical application. It's like, man.
Well, tonight's tradition then is perfect for you.
Yeah. And tonight, for the listeners, we're going through 6 and 7. Yeah. And, but yeah, so I started learning, like, oh man, like, although I have an opinion and some of the stuff that this facility does, it doesn't necessarily match with my opinion. I was able to keep all that at the door, and,
right.
And just be there for what my purpose was. Right.
Right. And each of the traditions, for anybody that might be hearing this for the first time, each of them builds one on another. And they all started with this idea in the first tradition that what we want is unity for Alcoholics Anonymous. And that does not mean agreement. It does not mean money. It means unity with a singleness of purpose. Our goal is to carry a message to the person who needs that message. That's our goal. It's the only goal. It's our only purpose.
Yeah.
And anything that gets in the way of that. So we're going through, now this is the 6th week, we've gone through after that first discussion around unity, we've gone through now 5 different ways after tonight that we can get off track with unity and be creating disunity. Yeah. Like you said, there's other things I can do. I can have opinions that aren't appropriate for AA, and that can create disunity. We talked about that, the mind your own business tradition.
Yeah.
And tonight, would you be good enough to read that tradition for us, please?
Absolutely. This is tradition 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Experience.
Wow.
Yeah, let me keep going. I'm going to read the next part.
Yep.
Experience proves that we cannot endorse any related enterprise, no matter how good. We cannot be all things to all men. We saw that we could not lend the AA name to outside activity.
That's a big deal. And don't we always want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the tradition runs smack up against my ego. And I have to develop a stronger sense of humility to get past it. All of these call for giving up a little bit, in my case, of Judy's opinion or Judy's desire for, as it says, prestige or money or property, or, there's each one of them require me to give up something for the good of the whole. So in tradition 6, it's talking about One of the things that interferes with the group's primary purpose or confuses people about what is and is not our 12-step group compromises its mission. So you and I have talked about this. I attend a club. My meeting is held in a club, is what I'm saying. And my meeting rents space from that club, and they tell us how much rent they want from each of the groups. Sometimes we used to meet in the church, and they charged us a couple of $100 a month, but they can get $1,000 a night for a wedding. So they have decided to purpose their church for other things. So now we meet in a club house that rents out space. And that should be fine. Each group gets to kind of set up their own space and in time, right? We are the 7:30 meeting on Saturday night in Boulder, Colorado. And that's this little meeting. But what happens if we get confused and think that the club is us? Because the club hosts lots of things, including other 12-step groups. It hosts wilderness hikes. It hosts the usual summertime softball league. And if I get those things confused and I'm a newcomer who comes into that clubhouse looking for a meeting, and what I see is the dance and the hike and all that stuff, I worry a bit that it confuses the newcomer, or cards left around for the sober cruise people that have a business, or the artists that would like to sell some of their stuff. So we have to, I think, draw some clear lines of separation from what is Alcoholics Anonymous group to what is the host. You wouldn't want to meet in the Baptist church and have the Baptist minister trying to sell you on their religion at every meeting, for example. Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah. When we have a space, we need it to be free of for Alcoholics Anonymous people to be exactly what they are, and not be asking them to try to be whatever is the facility. We're not Catholics when we meet in a Catholic church. We're not Buddhists when we meet in the Buddhist temple, or any of that. But additionally, we're also not commercial stuff because we meet in a strip mall. Right? Yeah. And we don't know about that. So what does it mean to lend the AA name to any related facility? Like the Alano Club I meet in does not claim to be, they don't have a big sign out that says AA. They don't have a big sign that says Wellness Center. We simply rent that space from them, just like we did when we rented it in a church basement. It took a little while. The minister, he was such a delight. He came down our meetings and said, I want to really welcome you to the church. We're so glad you're here. And we hope you'll come up for some meetings or some of our services. Yeah. And everybody went, uh-huh. Yeah. And some of the members of our community sang in a choir at that church. And some of the members that were part of a church that was next door offered to let us use their parking lot when they didn't use it on a Saturday night. There's things that I think are really lovely, but we can't confuse it because the newcomer won't know the difference. And we have to be careful about that. I'm pretty convinced that the future of AA lies in how well we can follow our traditions at all levels of Alcoholics Anonymous, right down to the bottom levels at GSO. The bottom feeders are our board of trustees. It is the groups that are the most important, which is why the traditions really talk about group problems and how it helps us to stay within a given set of principles. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the purpose of the tradition is kind of to ensure that we don't associate the group in anybody's mind, in the public mind, or any other organization with anything other than Alcoholics Anonymous. And sometimes that's hard to do because where we meet, if we meet in a treatment center, they will see it as kind of a semi-endorsement or ownership. They basically don't when we meet in a prison, however, but they do when we're in a treatment facility sometimes.
Yeah.
It's important to remind new people, in case someone's new on here, traditions are not laws. There's no AA police. We don't have roving enforcement teams. They are adhered to by members out of respect and the love for the fellowship. They teach us how to think rather than what to think.
Wow.
So how to think is, how do I evaluate what I'm doing in terms of this tradition, right?
Yeah.
So we occasionally have to write to our newspapers reminding them of our traditions and asking them to be thoughtful and to respect our anonymity. But we are the ones who usually forget first. We forget from time to time. We do. So in my home, if we were talking about this in all of our affairs, the couple, let's just change that, to change the language informally. There's no set of rules for this. These are spiritual principles, spiritual in nature, that is not tangible by their nature. But when I'm practicing that kind of principle, how does it apply in my home? So we would want to say a couple might not ever want to let problems of money, property, or prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Sounds good. What does it mean? What is a primary purpose? And I suspect it helps to have a conversation within your family over what's the primary purpose of our marriage or our relationship or our family or our partnership, whatever it is. It's easier to see in a company sometimes, maybe not. We lose track even in a company when we get all business and forget that we have a primary purpose. And that everybody in the group, whatever that group is, needs to be, that primary purpose would need to be understood by all the people involved. Otherwise, we're not going to focus on it or give it any intentional action. So often when I'm arguing about those things, and I do sometimes, if I'm truthful and call things by their right name, I would have to call myself dishonest for fighting over issues that aren't really what we're fighting over, right? Have you ever done that?
Absolutely. The need to be right is always a big one.
The need to be right. How about power in a relationship?
Yeah.
Never shows up as power. It shows up over vacuuming or a sink or food or a night out, and usually we disguise what it is we're really fighting about anyway.
Yeah.
So the issue Lou and I have had when we moved in together, we were remodeling a kitchen. This is a very funny story to me. Now we're both sober. 5 years, approximately. And we were busy remodeling a kitchen shortly afterwards. So by both our professions, we were both involved in construction and improvement careers. We had our first knockdown, drag 'em out fight over this kitchen. My beloved and I cooing around all of our time, holding hands, loving each other, and we get to fight till we're walking out the door, not speaking to each other over, got a big issue here, whether a half or a 3/4 horsepower was the right one to buy.
I get that.
right?
Yes, yes.
Oh my God. And what was it really about? Well, yes, of course, it wasn't about the disposal. It was about respect for each of our right to be recognized as an authority over what they did for a living and feeling like we weren't being respected for that knowledge. And then maybe the idea that maybe the other one thinks we'd made a mistake and now what? So fear. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Happens to me all the time.
We've laughed about that a lot. This fight over who has power, who has respect, who has attention. So what's the idea? The idea is that we talked about that anything that interferes with the primary purpose or confuses people about what that primary purpose is compromises our mission and what's our intention.
Let's touch on that real quick. So when you talked about the primary purpose in a relationship, what does that look like? Because I'm going to unity when I think that, but what do you think that is? Like, what do you mean when you're saying that?
Well, in our case, I would say our primary purpose together was to be the core of a family. To come together in partnership that was holy.
Oh.
I don't mean religious. I mean a sacred mission in a way. We'd both been disappointed a lot in our choices when we were out drinking and living the life that got us here. And this time we were trying to be very deliberate, not knowing how really stupid we were. Really, we didn't know that. But we were trying. We were young, we didn't listen to anybody, but we were trying. So we had, we don't want to associate other issues like political opinions or religious beliefs or any other organization that come between us. And the issues that we had at the time were kind of secret. We were both trying on how to be in a relationship. And what's the purpose? Well, was the purpose to create a better kitchen? No, it wasn't. It was to create a couple who could be solid enough to support and be a part of a larger family circle and enrich and nourish and fulfill each other's best, highest good, I would say.
Nice.
That would be, I think, what we had kind of in mind. I think we both would, I'm more verbal, so I would probably have said that, and Lou would probably have thought it. But I think we would be in agreement over that was kind of our plan, to take our places inside his family and my family as family members, as healing, mending, helpful family members.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge.
Well, it is huge. But again, I'm his third wife. He's my second husband. We've got lots of opportunities to see how we did it wrongly, perhaps, or decisions we'd made. And it's really easy, both at home and at work, to hijack our objectives. I've talked about that. I was a lousy employee. I got my work done, but I really hijacked my organization and helped it into a place of resentment and a place of entitlement because of my own fear and my own ego-centeredness. It happened. It really did. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to take just a little different tack on that. Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob signed the letterhead for Marty Mann, who was one of the early alcoholic women, right? They encouraged Marty Mann, who felt as though, among other things, that we didn't have any public education foundation. She saw a need for it, and she started it. It was called the National Council on Alcoholism. Bill was so involved, and I think Dr. Bob was too, but I know Bill was because I've seen his signature, and I don't remember Dr. Bob's. Today, the National Council on Alcoholism has morphed into the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Addiction. And they are involved in prevention, treatment, and recovery. So a friend of ours was the Colorado head of that, and he was a longtime member of AA, but he had to wear different hats at different times. He couldn't be the alcoholic doing that, and he couldn't be national counsel when he came to AA.
Mm.
They were very different. He had a wealth of understanding, but at the time when they offered it, there wasn't anything like that when Marty Mann started it. She had a new corporation, much needed, great purpose. They wanted to do assistance and public awareness and all that kind of thing. Bill had no business putting his name on letterhead, and it was because of that that we learned this tradition.
Mm. Wow.
Because they said, what the heck are you doing? You can't endorse somebody else's corporation and mingle that name with Alcoholics Anonymous. In the first place, the National Council operates on funds and donations around the country. AA does not take donations. Did you know that? We don't take donations, although our trustees would love it. But we don't take donations, and the reason for that in the public eye, think about this, we are never, ever competitive with any nonprofit for their funding sources. Mm. And that's part of what we're going to talk about in the seventh tradition. We are never going to be a competition for any organization when there's a limited pool of money and you've got more than one applicant for it. You don't ever want to see AA's name be in competition for that money. Mm. Because that's not what we do, and that leaves us absolutely clean in the way of self-supporting and who calls the tune for Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah.
The National Council has to take donations. They help communities heal. They do classes. It's appropriate for them to do many things that my group and we as a group would not. But just like we can't help everyone, in AA, we also don't do advocation for other groups, nor do we do fundraising. So our recovery is private and it's anonymous within the fellowship. Both traditions, we haven't talked about a lot, but we certainly will. But our recovery is private does not mean that nobody knows that we're in AA, but it's private certainly at any public level. Mm. But Bill didn't know that. We didn't have that tradition then. He encouraged Marty Mann, signed his name on the letterhead, and the public outcry was such that he later had to have it removed. Oh. Thank God for a public outcry, and he listened. We don't always listen to the members now, but Bill also developed a belief in niacin, B3.
Yeah.
He took it and it helped his depression. He was introduced to the idea at a psychology conference, and he went around trying to get everybody he knew to take niacin.
Yeah.
Bill,
whatever
shut
happened
up.
with that? Whatever happened with that? I was curious. Nothing. It just kind of fizzled.
Well, finally he understood that he was making people crazy. He's trying to get them sober, trying to get everybody he knows to take vitamins. We have a singleness of purpose, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as you mix other stuff with it, they can't hear both purposes.
Wow.
So tradition 6 suggests AA won't endorse, sign at the top of the thing. We won't finance. No, we don't. And we don't lend the AA name to the AA Memorial Day run as a sponsor or any of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And later on, we're going to, Tradition 10 is going to talk about how we don't have any opinion on outside issues. So we can't get involved in public controversies. And when Bill signed that letterhead, he created a public controversy. So these traditions tie together. No public controversies. It's part of why we don't go to court. No public controversies. We stay out of the news. under the radar so that our members cannot, and every now and then there's somebody who hasn't learned enough about humility yet, who thinks that for the good of mankind, the world needs to know about their recovery.
Yeah.
Historically, and with all the good intentions, the lesson learned from our very ambitious co-founder Bill is that they wanted, at one point, the good lesson was they started, and years into this thing, Bill wanted to open a chain of hospitals that Dr. Bob could manage. They yearned with all the best intentions to help Skid Row drunks who had no place to live. Maybe we'll have a housing. Maybe we can help them get sober. And of course, AA would then have to sort out who could get sober, who stood the best chance, and help them to earn a living. Maybe we'd get some apartments too, so they could live in them.
Wow. I never thought about the sorting out part. It's so true, though. Wow.
Right. Instead of helping people get past alcoholism, Bill diverted the thoughts to other solutions and damaged his own group. Doctors, even doctors in AA, friends of Bill's, weren't happy about it. He wasn't a licensed physician. What business has he got talking about the virtues of vitamin therapy? For God's sakes,
Yeah.
So Bill was a strong seeker always. And fortunately, he made enough mistakes that we could learn from them.
Yeah. And he left it for us.
Right.
That's so awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
So one problem with AA becoming a major player in legislation or hospital management or public education is that it makes us become public facing. And then we could step in and try to resolve employer-employee disputes. How about that? There's a perfectly good EAP, and it's not run by AA.
Yeah.
But that idea kind of would have been the AA EAP. And then pretty soon you've got, somebody's got to be paid to do this, so maybe we need a little bit of profit too. Oh, we're going to need an office and some phones. So very quickly, our good intentions become commercial. Bill talked about, wanting to have a helping place. So each of these, sober living houses, halfway houses, detox centers, all of these various places starts with the best of intentions. And here's Judy's opinion. Strictly Judy's opinion, whether it's true or not, you can figure it out. But shortly after we open the doors with our good intentions, and we're so proud of, we're going to do good, we begin to realize that in order to keep the doors open for my beloved good deal work, I have to have money. And lots of it are the doors don't stay open. So the premise then gets buried in between, I have to have money to keep the good work going. And pretty soon, all we're talking about is the money for our good purpose. Yeah. So history is full of people who, and we can see it all around us, people who have made terrible compromises with their initial values in order to keep the doors of something open. Even politics, God forbid. I'm not going to get political, but just an observation that in order to do the good one intends to do with their elected office, you have to win the election first. And to win the election, you have to compromise and make friends in kind of a bargain with Dr. Faustus, My soul perhaps isn't really too much to pay for all the good I can do for you. But it's really kind of a really practical dilemma. I have to be elected to do good. Now, how do I get elected without selling myself out? And it's the same with us.
Wow. The diversity.
So even Yeah, what am I willing to do? Make my bargain with the devil. You give me this thing, I'll do such good, but boy, I got to be friends with that guy, and that guy wants something from me, you know?
Yeah.
So even at work, I've been guilty of this. AA came before my ethical obligation to the people who hired me to do a day's work. And maybe that's some kind of a reverse affiliation. I don't know, maybe not, but it's not very honest either.
Right.
So as soon as we get involved with outside enterprises, some affiliated thing, you're in competition with somebody. And then you get into confusion in the public eye, if not in my own eye. So we don't compete. In AA, you can have it all. We're not going to compete. So AA, in our tradition, cautions all the members who wear two hats to be cautious about mixing up their roles. I think it's hard at any job to have two hats going on, even with a family. I could be the CFO of the Betty Ford Institute. Of course, I'm not. But I could be the CFO. But when am I done being the CFO? When I go to a meeting? Or I'm Judy, another alcoholic, and it's really important for me to get it in my own mind that what I am is an alcoholic, and this is my living that I'm earning. Even if I think I'm just doing good. I have to keep it in mind just like I have to keep it in the public's mind. Because nobody in the alcoholism field gets to be an expert when they're at a meeting. They got all those words. They got so many words that they don't have any meaning anymore. Because they've all got the language. It's probably very dangerous for them. Professionalized AA members, there's a lot of them, but it's really hard to be a good AA member. And many have returned to drinking or dry alcoholism. Yeah, it's a true thing. Not that it can't be done, but I think it's rarer than we acknowledge. So our club in Boulder, where my meeting is, it was begun by a dedicated bunch of AA members. They worked on this, opening up this space for about 2 years, lots of dedicated work, contributions. They hired one of the members who tried to meet the demands of the board that wanted an office space in the middle of a mini shopping mall. So they needed to fill the time slots for meetings right away. And then they realized they had to put in their own money every month because the little groups weren't contributing enough. And the groups want 90% of their basket as rent, leaving nothing left over for contributions to central office or to send a GSR to the assembly. But pretty soon it was clear that in order to support them, other groups needed to come in. Nice space, plenty of parking, big sign. New meetings came in. And so we've got everything. We've got pickleball and we've got wellness meetings, and we could advertise on the big board, famous person, and then we give that first and last name to everybody who might be coming to that facility, whether they're alcoholic or not. Wow. Open AA meeting, and then we've got the anonymous emotions anonymous meeting and the dance on Saturday night. And what do you think? A new person might be confused?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's all good stuff. I'm not passing a judgment on the things. But if we are the first stop on the road to recovery from somebody that we don't even know who the person is, but we're trying to sell them on the idea of sponsorship, 12-step involvement, general service, doing your inventory, shutting up and stop complaining to their family, finding God, learning the AA language we throw at people, that's a lot for a newcomer.
Absolutely. So true.
And they're supposed to sort it out, but how do they do that when they're put on, on the same table with sober cruises and dances and everything else, I've said this before. When you and I meet, it's a life and death mission.
Yeah. My
life and your life, both are at stake without confusing and distracting me. into other things, right?
Yeah, and that gets lost. Like even without all this stuff we've been talking about, it's so easy to
Yep.
get lost. Period. Right?
It's so easy.
I mean, like,
And we don't, it's not like somebody's fighting it. We're like, I know people that say, I want them to know they can have fun in AA, so I'm going to sell them on AA fun.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What happens when we don't offer them the solution either?
Mm-hmm.
We mix up our own message. That's all.
Yeah.
And we try really hard not to do that. We're supposed to, there's some wisdom about being what we say we are. And to do that, we gave up ownership of things. We gave up legal claim to the circle and triangle. We forgot to renew our big book, and so we lost a couple of the copyrights. We apparently have a lot of archives, but we don't check in too often with them either. We're so alcoholic. When we gave up those symbols of recovery, when we gave up the original manuscript, when we forgot to renew our copyrights, it seemed to me that what we actually are is closer to what we are.
Mm.
We're closer because it's not wrapped in all the symbols of what we are.
Mm. So the basis, some kind of spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
Practicing anonymity and corporate poverty and owning our purpose.
Mm.
The beauty of this is we own in AA, we're supposed to own only our good name.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that's worthy of protection. So that's a lot about affiliation. We own only our good name.
It's even general service, the general service office, they rent that, right? They don't own any of that.
Oh, yeah, we rent our space there for sure.
All that, yeah. I heard.
And we get the really cheap rent. Now, there are a lot of us that think that they should move out of New York, partly just to diffuse the New Yorkness of our office and get into cheaper space. Our general manager makes moderate money for New York, extremely good money for anywhere else.
Yeah.
For example, people are paid well to work at Alcoholics Anonymous. But well in New York looks different than well in Minnesota or Houston or Denver or, one of those places.
Mm-hmm.
So, God bless the sponsors that help people to understand their first step and know why they're here and how to help new people in this divine mission that we are in to offer hope and a solution. It's a sacred responsibility. And the greatest reward is that we get to live a life of grace and purpose and meaning. Not grace.
Yeah, that's huge, right? It's so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we made a lot of mistakes, and we'll probably make lots more, but I think we've had a lot of help from a higher power to get there because Bill was so willing to acknowledge all of his mistakes. Not all of the time are we willing to acknowledge our mistakes. So there's a lot to be said for that, right?
Yeah.
You want to move on to tradition 7?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I think this is a big deal. These are real chewy, good traditions.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of opinions about them.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think if we read what we're doing and pay attention, I think that we'll notice that we're so lucky that these things were written down to be guides, like a sponsor's job, which says, I already walked this way and there's a lot of snakes over here.
Yeah, you're about to run off a cliff.
Right, you're going to run off a cliff. You can do that if you want to, but I'm going to go over this way instead.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to come with me.
Yeah.
And even at that, we don't always do that either.
Yeah.
We're so funny. So You want to read Tradition 7? I think it's a big deal and a simple one,
Okay.
but it's a big, simple one.
All right. Tradition 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. No AA tradition had the labor pains this one did. Collective poverty, initially a matter of necessity, fear of exploitation, necessity of separating the spiritual from the material, decisions to subsist on AA voluntary contributions only, placing the responsibility of the supporting AA headquarters directly upon AA members, bare running expenses, plus a prudent reserve is headquarters policy.
Right. And their policy includes, according to concepts, them being responsible for the prudent use of that money. Prudent use of that money. We're supposed to have 10 months of prudent reserve. We're currently down to about 6 months.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that we have forgotten what it is we're doing in a desire to follow other roads, other attractive roads, let's just say. So no group ever is supposed to have any public solicitation of funds. Do you know how many clubs have solicited funds? Tons. No public solicitation of funds. And we always justify it like we do our own bad behavior on, but I have this good thing I'm going to do with the money. It's okay to waive this tradition this time because it's such a noble cause. They're very clear, and it says in the long form, and I'm going to read this because I think it's so important for us because we get so wrapped around stuff with money. The AA groups themselves ought to be fully supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. We think that each group should soon achieve this ideal, that any public solicitation of funds using the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is highly dangerous, whether by groups, clubs, hospitals, or other outside agencies. So there isn't any good reason. And then it says the acceptance of large gifts from any source or of contributions carrying any obligation whatever is unwise. Any contribution that comes from outside AA or even large gifts from within AA, they've just upped the personal contribution again because they really want money at that level. Then, too, we view with much concern those AA treasuries which continue beyond prudent reserves, to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. Experience has often warned us that nothing can so surely destroy our spiritual heritage as futile disputes over money, property, and authority. So, direct concerns that are direct areas of concern spiritually are taking gifts, accumulating money, soliciting funds, or any voluntary contribution from outside AA. 4 areas that deeply alter this spiritual basis in terms of AA. But this is such a wide tradition. I feel like I want to talk fast to get in all the stuff that this talks about. There's lots of side roads one could go down, and I'm going to try not to do that. But you know, it reads like the clearest of traditions. And it's kind of an echo of the 7th step. We make amends, including paying them back their money, plus interest, and the concepts which speak of this as well. This is such a big deal for us. We are so crazy about money stuff. We have issues, folks, like relationships and money, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do we get backwards? Relationships and money. Fear generates insecurity. Those things were around in the 40s when they wrote these traditions. It's a human problem. And that makes us, as alcoholic humans, doubly invested in how much of a problem we can create over money. And that means both ways, both the incoming money and the outgoing money, right? What do we spend our money on? Money is often in families, in groups, and in everything. It's a substitute for other things. You know, when you and I were talking earlier about this disposal thing, one costs more money. And I'm always willing to say, get the one that will not need to be replaced. I want it to be done. It doesn't mean that it's the best of something. It means get something that is substantial. Mm. But money is a substitute for other things. It can be a substitute for power, love, or control. So we want to be really careful to stick with the principles that we set up, which in AA means self-ownership and corporate poverty. And could we practice that in a way in the family? At least self-ownership. And not making money the sole reason for our purpose as a family. So Bill was clear in the 12 by 12. He said that the trustees declared for the principle that AA would always stay poor. Bare running expenses plus a prudent reserve would be our corporate policy. And our trustees are often plotting to get past their own fear. You know, not on my watch. Can't lose it on my watch. You know, outsiders we ask, what's your budget policy in AA? And we say, well, we kind of throw a dart at whatever we think is going to happen next year based on last year. It's really true. That's all the budget is. It's a guess. Throw a dart. Remember, we have no fundraisers. We're the only nonprofit in the country that has no fundraisers. We're non-competitive with other nonprofits. We never compete. We're always independent. And that means we're dependent on something bigger than ourselves, on God's will. And that alone allows us to approach in the public eye anybody with trust and confidence that we are trustworthy in that public's eye, that what we say will be honored because we keep our commitments, that kind of thing. It's really a big deal when we get off track or don't pay our bills on time. We shake the world's confidence and we put our good name at risk. And so people, old timers who are paying attention to budgets, a lot of us don't even know how to read a budget. I'm one of them. But I start asking questions like, why are we behind on our reserve? What are we doing with that extra money? Why aren't we building up our obligations and paying our bills on time? Somebody has to ask that question. We have several people, to bring it down to my home group, who never put in a dime when we passed the basket. Never. But they're members if they say so. They can come to an AA meeting and no one gives them the side eye, you know. Our rent always gets paid. So when we come to an AA meeting, you're an alcoholic if you say you are. If it's a closed meeting, or anyone, if it's an open meeting, that's our third tradition. But this is a little beyond it. It's about who pays the expenses, who pays for the coffee, the rent, and the literature, who helps keep us functional. We tell people anyone can attend, it's free, and then we insist they should put money in the basket in the second breath. I myself like and prefer that at some meetings, if you're new, they're encouraged to attend and maybe not put anything in the basket till they're sure they want to stay.
Mm.
And until then, perhaps they'd like some literature.
Oh. Nice.
AA doesn't need a lot of money, no matter how often we're begged for more. The AA doesn't need a lot of money. We don't have advertising to cover. We do and should have a plan for how to keep our message going, and that might include other means of reaching people with an AA message in today's world. But I think that should be somebody's well thought out, well discussed plan. How do we get our literature out? How do we get our name in front of the people who need it? What about homeless people? They are not watching the Disney Channel.
Yeah. Mm.
So how do we do that? Well, that's my obligation in my area, because GSO doesn't do that in my area. They're doing GSO stuff. That's why they don't get any money from us, barely ever. Because we want to cover what are we doing with our money here and make sure that our outreach is being paid for and being thought about here. So we can slice up whatever money we have into its bits. We have our expenses, they come out first, and we see what we have left over, and then we divide that. We don't have a $4 million slush fund, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Every month, the treasurer asks if we can and should pay our expenses and our contributions, and every month our little group has fairly fearlessly said yes, because we don't hoard money in AA. So there's a circle of love and service that talks about making some examples of how you might proportion your income. Some groups have a lot of income, some groups have very little, but never is there a requirement that you do that with the other areas of AA. They're going to represent you whether you never send a nickel, but we like to be a part of things because we like to know what's going on in our AA, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Some areas have to support a central office, some areas don't have one. But a central office that's doing its job is going to be a great PR, place. And when they're not doing their job, they probably ought to be closed down.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but nobody is ever required to pay anything to go to an AA meeting, ever. If there's a fee, it's usually for a membership in a club. Like maybe you come in early and play cards or something. I don't think that I want to be a part of a club like that, but there are such clubs. So you can come hang out and have coffee and eat at the grill or whatever. I heard tell that there's a meeting somewhere, a group that has a several $1 million slush fund. They're going to try and buy a golf course so they can be the AA golfers. God, right?
Crazy.
We're so nuts. So we did solicit money ourselves. We even solicited publicly. But, our history says that it arouses a lot of controversy and isn't worth it. So what activates our issues? Money, authority, prestige, right? Oof.
All our favorite stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fine goal for many of us who are used to being child adults to be treated as a protected species when we're like in treatment or someplace. And then we get out and we find we're frightened by our inability to care for ourselves. So we really have to address it within the membership. We pay for ourselves. And I don't care if you're homeless, you reach in your pocket and put a quarter in, but always try to participate. Because that way you claim your ownership of AA. And you maybe claim your pride. You know how much more pride you have when you know you pay your bills?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm an adult.
Mm.
You know, for some of us who've been children for so long, you know, it's really kind of a big deal. But a lot of us just get really tight-fisted when we get sober. Anyway, so that's part of it. And before we're done, and I know we've been on this for a while, I want to say something about how does that apply in the family? How does this, because I believe this is my opinion. I've talked a lot about the group and the spiritual condition and growing up and that kind of thing. But if I'm willing to think for myself, I have to say, I really believe, and I'll just throw this out, you don't have to buy it. The traditions are about the group. But I am convinced that in order for me to grow up, this tradition is asking me to be self-supporting in all the areas of my life. So it's all the different areas of my life, and it's all the different areas of my soul. How am I self-supporting spiritually? Do I do my own work? Do I let somebody else do it for me? There's lots could be included in that. Am I self-supporting financially? Do I contribute? Am I self-supporting sexually in my marriage and in my family? How am I? Do I wait for somebody else to always call the tune? Or do I wait and use it as a lever in other ways? Am I using that as a tool for control, power, resentment, all those things? So am I self-supporting sexually? I think that's a piece of it. Am I self-supporting but emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually, spiritually, financially? There's lots of ways. That's 6 different ways that cover most of my life. There's probably others. Parentally, maybe for some of us. Am I self-supporting? In other words, do I pull my weight? Do I make sure that I focus where I should be focusing and make sure that I don't over-rely on others to decide or to suggest or to make commitments while I go along with no investment, even down to if my husband and I have a date night, we should take turns figuring out who's committed enough to decide where we're going to go.
Yeah.
I don't leave it up to one person to dominate.
Yeah.
I'm not a silent partner. I want to make an investment. So do I maintain my own spiritual condition regardless of others and their choices? Mm. Do I develop my own opinions after thinking? Am I willing to think for myself?
Mm.
Am I courageous enough to have my own opinions?
Nice.
All of those are relationship issues, those between one group or one person or another. And I think all of them are worth my consideration because it's so easy to fall into passivity or either dominate or be submissive or non-participating in the most important aspects of my life. So, do I do my share of the work? Or do I leave it to others? I got to sweep my own street first, wash my own dishes in every sense of the word, right? Not just the tangible dishes, but wash my own dishes in my life. Clean up after myself. And then maybe I can help you until we both learn how to do it better. So, and lastly, I want to say, because I think this is really important, there are groups of people, believe it or not, who use the AA good name to further their own business interests. Mm. And even sometimes a random member will try to trade on that as well. Money and self-interest are always at the root of such actions, regardless of what we say. So we who are aware of the traditions have to be careful about being a good sponsor to help others understand those things too. Members have a lot to learn, and it's a steep curve of new language. It's a very big, giant AA puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So we once, just another closing story, I've served on a bunch of committees, and we once had a treasurer of our convention committee. He was enthusiastic and willing to be the person responsible for the publicity. He was the publicity chair for that convention. And only at one meeting did he actually tell us of his plans in a way that we could relate to. And that was before my cell phone handled all of my life, by the way. So he planned and announced that he'd written ads to be placed on TV, advertising the convention. Come one, come all. And then added there was a $25 fee for attending. Now, because the convention is an outside venue and self-support requires money for these outside events, we understand it in AA, but can you imagine a newcomer thinking of coming, or a treatment professional who might come and see what AA is doing, and then we say, nothing is required for AA membership, but here's your $25 fee if you want to get into the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's chaotic, to try to say we're one thing and then publicly make such foolish statements in public. So the committee on this one rose as one to disagree. I mean, there were so many things wrong with that. We couldn't talk fast enough. He knew as he was, didn't understand. He was trying to bring his passion and enthusiasm, and yet he couldn't see how thoughtless that would have been, and how confusing to somebody who was new. And of course, he was very offended at our reaction to it. So there's probably only 15 or 20 people a year who contribute thousands of dollars in the U.S. And you got to be a member to do that. Even if the family of a deceased person wishes to donate, that person is supposed to donate by some kind of legal right to do that. We must not be ruled by money, or we'll be in greater danger of fights over property and money and authority. We must pay our bills. We must pay the money we owe people, so that as adults we don't have to be fearful of anything, and we can stand tall and pay our own way. One of the lies we tell ourselves is my meeting is self-supporting, and then we pay $3 for a meeting, to the church.
Yeah.
And we don't pay the church fair rent. Almost none of the groups do. So, what would you do if AA ran out of funds? Do you think we'd be okay if we asked the government to subsidize the AA groups? We'd be doing good there. So some surrender to the principles we're talking about, families and workplaces and others. The warranties really work in our concepts about trying to help keep us on ground. It's really important to remember that there is a way to combine both money and spirituality. And this is a thing that always says we have sufficient funds plus an ample reserve, and then we don't worry about money. And they put it in terms of this lovely little old-fashioned word, prudence. So when has any alcoholic wanted to practice prudence?
I tell you, what keeps showing up. It's funny that you use the word passivity. I can't pronounce it.
Passivity.
Yeah, and that's the second or third time this week, or the last couple of weeks, that I've been thinking about how the difference between being passive and being active, right? And
right,
it's funny because there's a level of responsibility there, right?
Right. And our stuff isn't demandingly romantic, and we love the drama of romance, but We instead have this very quiet spirit of common sense, mutual respect, trust. It's very unflashy, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I don't know about you, but I was on broken promises and food stamps when I got here.
Yeah. And
And my living amends is trying to live in such a way that my children will see the different me, will respect my word, and show up whenever, and I show up whenever I'm invited.
yeah.
Bringing something of self-support to the occasion. Bring the blessing and the acknowledgement of this way of life to every occasion. I can't buy my children's lost childhood years by throwing money at them now. I can't throw stuff at them now. What I get to do is just show up and try to be an honorable person in the family. It's not very flashy, but I can be trusted today.
But it's just funny though, because like what we had mentioned in the past, it's like there's this core something in us that's what it's been searching for, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, financial, in all the areas. How have I been looking for a place of peace, a place of self-respect? How have I been doing that? And it clashes with my ego, don't you think?
Yeah. Power, right? It's just power,
Yeah.
power.
I always just wanted to be important.
Mm-hmm.
And I get here and I find the best, most important thing I can do is to say my prayers morning and night and say thank you.
Amen.
It's true.
So true.
It's true. If the highest you can get in AA is to be a member. The highest you can achieve.
Yeah, let's touch on that real quick. You'd made a comment. I think it may have been last night, maybe. You're talking about becoming a member and knowing what that is. Let's talk briefly on that.
Well, there's nowhere to get to be important. There's nothing to achieve in AA that is bigger than being a principled member of AA doing the AA work. We have purpose and we have meaning right here, right now. And you and I are charged with finding a way to be members and to leave AA in as good a shape as it was when I got here. To pass that on, it doesn't need Judy's improvement, although I always think it should have.
Yeah.
It's true. And in many cases, I've got to learn to accept the things that aren't perfect and to trust that God's will is somehow in order in all of the mess that is AA. It's hard for me some days because I don't agree with what goes on some days. But I get to be a part of this thing, sponsor others, and show up in a way that's just this quiet effect in the world. One more of multiple other people. Not better than anyone else, not less than anybody else, just a member.
Yeah. Equality. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not any better than the last drunk. When I sit down with a sponsee, I'm not a better than. We're on an equal basis. It is my job to have some history with AA enough that I'm challenged to transmit some of what I know and believe in through my experience. But that doesn't make me a better member. It just lets me be a member because that's what we do. It's what we do when I go to a jail or a treatment center or anywhere else that I show up. Am I just a member? I don't have to advertise it. I just get to be it. And sometimes that clashes with one's ego needs. And you see it all the time when people come onto TV or marches or radio or whatever. I want to save the world by telling them how wonderful I am.
Yeah.
I don't post my chip. I don't post friends of Bill. I just don't do that.
Yeah.
And yet, wouldn't my ego like to have 200 people sending me applause? Sure it would. Sure it would. That's the truth. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't dislike when people tell me I've done a good job. But the point is that if 500 people tell me I'm wonderful, and I've said this before, what happens when I start believe I'm wonderful? Because then I'm no longer a member. I'm somehow different from you. And my whole value in AA is to be another member.
Yeah.
Not to be different, to be part of this thing, so that you and I are the same and God is with both of us. Regardless of our length of sobriety, our education, our ages, our status, or anything. How can I be? And I think it's a daily challenge for all of us, by the way.
Yeah. Well, it's so common too. Like one of the, what got me into doing all this stuff, with the podcast and all this was that, I seen that there was a lot stuff like this was not talked about. And I'm not going to say like it is talked about, but it wasn't as talked about in the circles I was in at the time that I felt like there was like such a need for it. It was like, man,
well, you're doing good work with that because I think there is such a need for it.
Yeah.
I would never think to do it. I'm thrilled that you're doing it.
Well, it's crazy. Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But don't forget anonymity.
Yeah.
In the search for sending out a message.
Yeah.
We also got to trust that God will bring people, and my job is to make sure that the doors are open.
Yeah.
Right where I live.
And I realize
can't open all the doors. Can't open all the doors.
Yeah, yeah. And I realize that there's a responsibility that comes with this position, and also and I try to take certain precautions. I understand that for the new guy that comes on here, even with us talking, or new guy or girl, even with us talking all this stuff, saying it's not Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't even have any content to even understand what that statement even means.
Right. Right. I'm doing concepts, and we start talking about the conference and the board of trustees and all of that, and I'm thinking, what kind of gobbledygook does a newcomer take out of this?
Yeah, yeah.
Not that they aren't solid principles. It's just that the language gets in the way of understanding.
Yeah, my service sponsor took me to the service manual a few years ago, and I told him, I was like, you might as well throw all these words in a box and shake it up and throw them on this, But luckily I had this, this desire to want to know more, but actually because of what we've been talking about on these series is like how I started seeing how these principles applied to my life in all kinds of different areas, or was a great solution, right?
Right. Because I'm convinced anyway that relationships are all of them. My relationship with God is a relationship. My relationship with you is a relationship. My relationship with my group, my family, my children, all of these different, I have a relationship of sorts with my mailman, I guess. Once I see other people, as God's other kids, I realize I am in relationship everywhere I turn in my life.
Yeah.
And if I don't recognize that and act on it, then I suppose that's part of the appeal of traditions and kind of concepts. That even if you just grab something along to hang onto a branch and give something a name, and you'll fill in like coloring, do the red over here and then we'll get to the blue later. It's like coloring by dots. We get a few words and we hang on to them and then fill in some of the ideas later. At least that's how it worked for me.
Yeah.
And I'm a slow learner, so for me this stuff is really taken a hold one little deal at a time.
Let me ask you this. So earlier you were talking about the primary purpose of your relationship, being the core of a family. Like how long sober? Here I am wanting to compare my life. How much sobriety did you have before you had that kind of concept in your life? I'm curious.
Well, I think we had the concept long before we had the reality.
Gotcha.
So here's a thought, and with this, I'm going to leave you and go back to my family that's in the other room.
Okay.
I want to give you this thought. We had a great discussion among some of us this week over something that I've been reading for the 42 years I've been sober, and that never had registered until last week. So your question is like that. At what level do I understand? Maybe that's what changes. So in the doctor's opinion, after it says frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, it says, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have a book in front of me, that the new man has to have, we find that the new guy has to have his ideals grounded in something bigger than himself, or in the idea of God, or in something.
Yeah.
If he is to be able to get and maintain sobriety.
Yeah.
So 42 years later, I said, what does that mean? I've been reading that several times a week. We all do.
Yeah.
What are my ideals? I am suspicious of the fact that some of that is what you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
What are the ideals?
Yeah.
And if the new man must have them, and then must have them be grounded in sobriety or in a power greater than themselves, when I got here, what were the ideals that I had?
Mm-hmm.
And they were closer to things like, I need to be more important than I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I needed to be recognized more than I was. And I better get mine quick or there won't be any left.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. Those are basically the ideals that drove me before and early on in sobriety. And I think those are a set of ideals.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They aren't the ones that get you sober.
Yeah.
But they aren't the ones that disappear the day you walk in either.
No. Yeah.
So I picked up most of my ideals from listening to other people handle life's challenges.
Yeah.
And how they responded when they said, well, I can't do that anymore. I can expect to get sober. Mm-hmm. I had a couple of those real life things happen. People said, I can't do that anymore. I wouldn't expect to stay sober.
Yeah.
And I heard, oh, so maybe there's other ideals I could focus on. What are they? And how do I focus? And do I need them? Does the sponsor bring them? Do I learn them in meetings? Do I learn them there's this whole sentence kind of like, what does it mean, grounded? What does it mean when he says that? And, I've wrestled with that sentence a lot this week, because at first I thought it means I'm supposed to have those ideals before I can stay sober. But I don't think that's true, because it wasn't my experience.
Yeah.
I didn't develop other ideals except haphazardly over a fairly long period of time.
Yeah, same.
And then when my husband and I got together and made a commitment to each other, we made a commitment after that commitment already existed.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
That commitment was there before we ever said any words. Mm-hmm. And that commitment only gets said publicly as a reflection of a commitment already made. So I don't know, sometimes when we use words, it's a way of distancing myself from something tangible or something that I'm feeling that's deep. By the time I use words, those words are meaningless based on when I'm really deeply affected by something, I have no words. Mm. So the stuff that comes out of it, I don't know. I've been kicking that whole sentence around for a couple of weeks now. It's an easy answer, but it's one that maybe it had legs and grew deeper, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I do that often. I love that. I love it.
Yeah. So I don't have an answer for you, but I know that when we got together, we had purpose, and we had purpose in AA, and we had purpose when we got married, and we had purpose all the way through the worst time of our marriage when I was Googling how to smother him.
It's funny because it's just the waking up process is like,
because I hated him.
Wow.
And he had to die.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to get divorced. It would look bad.
Wow.
I mean, that's at 15 years sober. So that's how the inner alcoholic can really take hold at any level in one's life. I don't think just because we got time that we've got squat.
Yeah. Wow.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to get in touch with you because we don't have any future dates yet, but I will contact you like the next couple of days, and we'll come. I got a couple in mind. So thank you so much, Judy. This has been freaking awesome.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much. I hope it's useful.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the privilege.
Yeah, go have fun with your family and enjoy your time, and I'll be staying in touch with you. See you.
Great. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hello. Thank you for listening to 3 Legacies Recovery Recordings. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. We're also self-supporting, so feel free to contribute to the channel through Venmo at Recovery Recordings 615. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered as professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.